Okay, what I'm going to do for you tonight is a poem called The Dragon of Wantley, which was first published in 1699 in a collection called Wit and Mirth, or Pills to Purge Melancholy. It later turns up in a collection by a guy called Thomas Percy in 1765 called Reliques of Ancient English Poetry. And with the Pills to Purge Melancholy, that's kind of catharsis is the idea there, and you'll see that kind of purging element is right there in the poem as we get to it. It's essentially a comic piece, but because it is very old, I may be kind of having to labour the comedy a bit, like Shakespearean actors when they have to do all the elaborate miming to let you know there's a willy joke that you can't really tell without footnotes. So if there's gurning or I stop and explain things, that will be what's going on. Now, as I come to read the poem, some of you, particularly in the northeast, will go, hang on. In fact, you'll do it now because I'm telling you now. You'll say, hang on, isn't this a parody of the Lambton Worm? And it could well be, but the only issue is this was from 1699, and the first record we have of the Lambton Worm anywhere is, I think, 1735. So obviously, both stories could have been knocking around for ages, being told orally before they see any print. My kind of hunch is that they're both versions of the same tale, and they've been attached to different landscapes and to different important local families in order to survive. It's a kind of anchor point for a story, but it's about someone in the area, or it's about the area. I mentioned being attached to families and locations because since 1765, the Dragon of Wantley has been connected to the village of Wortley in South Yorkshire, just down the road from where I am. Just down the road from Greenough Woods, where Festival 23 was held a few years ago. And Thomas Percy, in his notes, explains that the poem is actually a thinly veiled satire on a local land dispute. The Wortley family, who ran Wortley, had Wortley Hall. Basically, there was a very rapacious landlord who took everyone's land, who starved the villagers, and they went and petitioned for fairer treatment, and this other guy came and sorted it out. The only issue with that is there seem to be two different versions of which member of the Wortley family it's supposed to be about. If it is a satire, it's a very vague one, and we've lost most of the details. Anyway, there is a cave on nearby Warncliffe Crags, which is identified as the Dragon's Cave, where I forced Ian Macmillan, the Bard of Barnsley, to recite this poem in the semi-dark amongst discarded beer cans for Radio 4, which I kind of think helped give this poem just a little boost again about 9-10 years ago, because it kind of fell into obscurity. It had been massively popular for years and years and years, and then kind of fell out of favour after hitting its peak in the Victorian era. Because in the Victorian era, this poem is the basis of an operetta, a pantomime, a novel. The character of the Dragon of Wantley becomes a kind of symbol of rapacious greed and anger. It's mentioned in Dickens, Ivanhoe by Walter Scott. E. Nesbit mentions it a couple of times, once as a character in a book. Then it's one of the engines in the Railway Children is the Wantley Worm, and it passes, I think, the Green Dragon on its route. Anyway, and Trollope, I think Anthony Trollope has a pub called the Dragon of Wantley. So it was kind of a known figure in the 19th century. And the odd thing is, really, it achieved this popularity despite the poem being kind of quite heavily bowdlerised in the Victorian era, where they took out anything they felt might have been offensive. They did it to King Lear as well. They gave it a jolly ending. But yeah, the Victorian version is the one you'll often find online if you look for the poem, because it's the one that's been in more recent collections. But if you go back to the original texts, you can see it's a cruder thing. As I say, recently the poem has got a little bit more recognition, I think partly because there's a little bit in it that lends itself to a kind of ecological thing about woodland being destroyed. New woods around Sheffield, there's one being put up called the Dragon of Wantley Wood, because there is that kind of tiny eco element. But mainly, this is quite a coarse bit of doggerel. Old stories tell how Hercules a dragon slew at Lerna, with 7 heads and 14 eyes to see and well discern her. But he had a club this dragon to drug, or he'd ne'er done it, I warrant ye. But More of More Hall, with nothing at all, he slew the Dragon of Wantley. There is a slight exaggeration there, I fear. More of More Hall. More Hall is an area in Sheffield nearby here. Doesn't slay the dragon with nothing at all, but we'll come to that. This dragon had 2 furious wings, each one upon each shoulder, with a sting in his tail as long as a flail, which made him bolder and bolder. He had long claws, and in his jaws 44 teeth of iron, with a hide as tough as any buff, which did him round environ. Have you not heard how the Trojan horse held 70 men in his belly? This dragon was not quite so big, but very near, I tell ye. Devoured he poor children 3 that could not with him grapple, and at one sup he ate them up, as one would eat an apple. Yeah, I think pushing for the rhyme there, you don't really eat an apple in one go. All sorts of cattle this dragon did eat, some say he ate up trees, and that the forest sure he would devour up by degrees. The houses and churches were to him geese and turkeys, he ate all and left nothing behind, but some stones, dear Jack, which he could not crack, which on the hills you will find. And that's the Warncliffe Crags, huge big chunks of stone that supposedly are things the dragon couldn't eat. In Yorkshire, near fair Rotherham, the place I know it well. Some 2 or 3 miles or thereabouts, I vow I cannot tell, but there is a hedge, just on the hill's edge, and Matthew's house hard by it. There and then was this dragon's den, you could not choose but spy it. Obviously it's a very old poem. It's hard to know now whether Rotherham was ever fair, or if that was just a little gag for the insiders, and it was all as much as it is now. Obviously all the rest of it is hinting at local knowledge too. Some say this dragon was a witch, some say he was a devil, for from his nose a smoke arose, and with it burning snivel, which he cast off when he did cough in a well that he did stand by, which made it look just like a brook running with burning brandy. The dragon's well there, a recurring motif in dragon legends also. In the Lambton Worm there's a prominent well, isn't there? Hard by a furious knight there dwelt, of whom all towns did ring, for he could wrestle, play at quarterstaff, kick, cuff and huff, call son of a whore, do anything more. By the tail and the mane with his hands twain he swung a horse till he was dead, and that which is stranger, he for very anger ate him all up but his head. Now, I kind of picture Desperate Dan, but played by Sean Bean. This is More of More Hall, our hero. I say that mainly because the poem kind of gets a bit giddy and forgets to say it too often. These children, as I told, been eat, men, women, girls and boys, sighing and sobbing, came to his lodging and made a hideous noise. "Oh, save us all, More of More Hall, thou peerless knight of these woods. Do but slay this dragon who won't leave us a rag on. We'll give thee all our goods." More Hall's now probably most famous for a reservoir there. "Tut, tut," quoth he, "no goods I want, but I want in sooth, a fair maid of 16 that's brisk and keen, with smiles about the mouth, hair black as sloe, skin white as snow, with blushes her cheeks adorning, to anoint me all night ere I go to fight, and to dress me in the morning." In traditional dragon legends, the hand of a maiden tends to be won after defeating the beast, but here, in a triumph of South Yorkshire pragmatism, they negotiate the maiden be delivered up front. This being done, he did engage to hew the dragon down, but first he went new armour to bespeak at Sheffield town, with spikes all about, not within, but without, of steel so sharp and strong, both behind and before, arms, legs, and all o'er, some 5 or 6 inches long. It's worth reinforcing here, Sheffield's fame for steelworks dates back way beyond the Industrial Revolution, and there is actually an ancient forge just outside the village of Wortley, Wortley Top Forge. Wortley, of course, being the Wantley of the poem, according to Thomas Percy. Had you but seen him in this dress, how fierce he looked and how big, you would have thought him for to be some Egyptian porcupig. He frighted all, cats, dogs and all, each cow, each horse and each hog. For fear they did flee, for they took him to be some strange outlandish hedgehog. I feel the poet's muse may have wandered off a little here, or whoever recorded it from an oral version lost their way a bit. A lot of repetition. Porky pig, hedgehog, rhyming hog with hog, all lazy. Anyway, there's one more bit like that, and the rest of it were home and dry. To see this fight, all people then got up on trees and houses, on churches some and chimneys too, but these put on their trousers. Not to spoil their hose, as soon as he rose, to make him strong and mighty, he drank by the tail 6 pots of ale and a quart of aquavitae. More of Moor Hall there, a bit of a boozer as well as a fighter and a fan of the ladies. I also feel the put on their trousers bit is a little bit for a kind of medieval Frankie Howard there. No, you're way ahead of me, you're making your own jokes up. Please yourself. It is not strength that always wins, for wit doth strength excel, which made our cunning champion creep down into a well, where he did think this dragon would drink, and so he did in truth. And as he stooped low, he rose up and cried, "Bow!" and hit him in the mouth. "Oh," quoth the dragon, "pox take thee, come out, thou disturbest me in my drink." And then he turned and shat at him. Good lack how he did stink. "Be shrew thy soul, thy body's foul, thy dung smells not like balsam. Thou son of a whore, thou stinkest so sore, sure thy diet is unwholesome." You'll not be surprised, this is one of the passages which gets a bit of a tweak in the Victorian era. Our politic knight on the other side crept out upon the brink, and gave the dragon such a douse he knew not what to think. "Thy cock," quoth he, "say your soul, do you see?" And then at him he let fly, with hand and foot, and so they went to it, and the word was, "Hey boys, hey!" This is the second passage I think is possibly a bit corrupted or obscure, and the dragon's next line actually I think reinforces that. "Your words," quoth the dragon, "I don't understand." Then to it they fell at all, like two boars so fierce, if I may compare great things with small. 2 days and a night with this dragon did fight, our champion on this ground. Though their strength it was great, their skill it was neat, they never had one wound. At length the hard earth began to quake, the dragon gave him a knock, which made him to reel, and straightway thought to lift him as high as a rock, and thence let him fall. But more of Moor Hall, like a valiant son of Mars, as he came like a lout, so he turned him about, and hit him a kick on the arse. "Oh," quoth the dragon with a deep sigh, and turned 6 times together, sobbing and tearing, cursing and swearing, out of his throat of leather. "More of Moor Hall, O thou rascal! Would I have seen thee never! With the thing at thy foot, thou hast pricked my arse gut, and I'm quite undone forever." "Murder! Murder!" the dragon cried. "Alack! Alack for grief! Had you but missed that place you could have done me no mischief." Then his head he shaked, trembled and quaked, and down he laid and cried. First on one knee, then on back tumbled he, so groaned, kicked, shat, and died. So yeah, the Victorians turned that into a kick in the throat, which makes a great deal less sense. You'd have scales all over the outside of your body, it'd just be inside you wouldn't. And I think that's probably also the origin of Smaug being shot by the arrow in the one bit where he hasn't got scales in The Hobbit, but I don't know that. So there you are. So you may find that illuminates old traditions, old legends. You may find it a bit of a nonsense. You may find it interesting how things mutate over time. I may have just wasted a few minutes of your life. Have fun with the rest of it.